think you found out in listening to her presentation is the importance of the imagery, that when you portray someone with a disability, what you're showing. So that's what we're about, disabilityimages.com. We are a distribution site, making available for all kinds of publishing, branding, marketing, imagery of real people with real disabilities. We try to make all our imagery very authentic. In fact, we've met a lot of people here at Work Without Limits job fairs that are actually our models, so that you know that they're authentic. And some of the things we've learned over the years, it was interesting to me in going into the thought pattern of preparing for this, to think back to the 90s when stock photography, which we are, was all marketed through printed catalogs. And in those days, an image to merit being in an expensive printed catalog had to be multi-conceptual, probably all white, no one with a disability. Anything that sold well was in a catalog. Fast forward to today, digital imaging and social networking, and I think we have a lot more sensitivity to different types of people, different types of looks, real people. They want to be reflected in the imagery for which they are buying your product or using your service. So what happened early on in the 2000s is distributors came around and said to people like us, we also produce some imagery. We want people with disabilities in the imagery. So we didn't know what we were doing. None of the production companies knew what they were doing. And so they really staged stuff, staged pictures, and I'll show you some of those kinds of staged imagery so you know what to avoid, because a person with disability can spot it a mile away, and this is not what you want to do. So what is a disability? We'll look at a little bit of that. There are all kinds of disabilities, MS, cerebral palsy, things that are obvious to things that are not so obvious, autism, depression. Where we are today, we really try to produce authentic imagery. So what is staged, what is real, what is quality? To me, quality, if you're going to be doing your marketing or branding, is very important that you have full model release on these people, full property release. Everything is cleaned of trademarks, everything is cleaned of logos. You have high quality files. A lot of things these days are put out, taken on cell phones. You have to be careful that everything is in focus and everything is good quality. But let's assume that's a given. What is staged? Early on in the 2000s, we were asked to do some photography of people with disabilities. So we put an able-bodied person in a business setting in a hospital wheelchair, and anyone with a disability can spot this right away. Okay? It looks staged. Same thing here, a hospital wheelchair in a business setting. It looks staged. A lot of you have probably used this kind of imagery, and this is exactly what you want to avoid, because anyone who has a disability would know that she doesn't have one. Once again, staged imagery. Not staged, as opposed to the slide before where the person was blind and that was staged. This is not staged. He's fully engaged in his activity. He can get around town and do anything he chooses to do. People with disabilities want to be reflected as they are in your advertising because, as Judy said, they are one of the biggest demographics of buying power. Not staged. In a wheelchair, this man works full-time, is a businessman. This is not staged. Sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference. That's why at disabilityimages.com we really try to make sure in the caption and the keywords where you find the imagery, we state what the person has so that you know that it actually is a real scene with a real person and a real disability. The other issue that's important to people with disabilities is the difference between what is visual and what is not visible. And many of you, if you are doing your marketing, may instantly default to the visible because it's the easiest thing to show. I'm just going to throw a wheelchair into this and everyone will know that someone is disabled. I'm going to throw a cane or a prosthetic limb or maybe a service dog or have a certain body type, and this makes it obvious, such as wheelchair, full-time teacher, such as service dog. About to go water skiing, adjusting your leg. Blind man can actually have technology to listen to his text messages. Service dog for visual impairment. Sometimes it's not immediately obvious on something like a deafness or visual impairment that something is going on, but you may see a service dog added to make it obviously a disability. And once again, the props showing that there's a disability. But there are lots of non-visible disabilities, and before I came to this, I interviewed many of the models we've worked with, and even if they had a visible disability, it seemed very important to them that somehow somehow in your marketing, to make sure to talk to the people, express to the people who all feel that they have invisible disabilities, to show them as well whether they have some kind of autism or depression or learning disability, deafness, visual impairment. You can't necessarily tell what's going on. It's just a pretty smiling face. There's actually disability. Babies learn sign language instantly. A facial expression. Can't tell what's going on here either. There is a disability going on. You could tell in our caption, our keywords. Same with this. Sisters at home doing their cooking. And here it's a little more subtle. You can tell that she has a visual impairment because she's holding the text up close. But otherwise, you might not be able to tell in just looking at her. This book is a little different in that it's subtle. You first look at it and you assume there's no disability, and yet if you study it a minute, you realize that she's actually sitting in a power chair, and down below at her right hand, you can see the power mechanism for the power chair. So you can be subtle. It's also maybe assumed that you know this already, but you should be sure to include a variety in your imagery of race, ethnicity, gender, age, even lifestyle, current trendy lifestyle. I think millennials are becoming very trendy, and you have to be aware of how they think they look. It's African American in his educational classroom, Hispanic young people, woman with a spinal cord injury who's determined enough to be a swimmer. Children are not afraid of anything. Touch their grandmother's prosthetic leg. You see a lot of tattoos these days, a lot of piercings, a lot of earrings. They're in style. And everyone who has a disability, as he has one, wants to be reflected somehow in your marketing and your branding. Also, body shapes is another big issue because you no longer have to see just the perfect body, and people with a disability, they have a variety of body types, but to them, that's okay, that's their norm, and that's something that you should show with pride. This fella actually works full-time in an office. This is his body type. Sitting in a wheelchair, you acquire a certain body type. Guys in wheelchairs tend to acquire a lot of upper body strength, which is great. And at the same time, if you don't, it's okay to show your legs, okay to show something that may look a little different, and may look a little unique, because that's their norm and that's okay, and they need you to know that. Use of a cane. Anyone in a wheelchair can actually do heavy-duty work. It was thought at one point that women with spinal cord injuries who do not have the use of their legs couldn't do yoga. But these two girls have shown that that's possible, and they like to be trendy. They decorate their wheelchairs. They have a lot of fun. Plus, they're just adorable. And here's a tricky one. I am amazed that this fellow actually works full-time and uses his computer with his foot. Also, I think it's important to realize that people with any kind of disability they want you to know that they have a full, complete lifestyle, just like anyone without a disability. They are able to have careers, relationships, play sports, have a full home life, get around town, go to school. So all of these things are typical scenarios that you might be able to use in your branding, as I think a lot of examples were shown by Judy in the ads that were created. So you can be a construction engineer from a wheelchair. You can be in love and have a home life. You can be very determined and get out of that wheelchair and into that racing bike if you decide to. Any number of sports are available. It's amazing how sports-oriented anyone with a disability is. Here's a picture of rehabilitation and someone with a spinal cord injury using muscle stimulation in order to improve or change the looks of his legs. Children with Down syndrome playing on a bed. Transportation is another big issue to people with this determination swimming with a spinal cord injury. Being in love, owning your own home. Working out on the docks from a wheelchair, transportation engineer. Rock climbing, even though you have a spinal cord injury, that's determination. And so in closing, I just want to make sure that you realize and think about when you're doing recruiting branding, marketing branding, anything, to be sure and think about there are of all kinds of different disabilities, visible and invisible. You need to think of all different types of people and different types of lifestyles. All kinds of body types are the norm, and that's okay. All kinds of lifestyles are the norm for people with disabilities. In fact, I think Judy was talking about Ernst & Young, EY, who created their own imagery. You can do that. We're here if you can't do that, in order to reflect people's lifestyles with disabilities and show positive messaging of all kinds of happiness, strength, determination, dreams, and so forth. Does anyone have any questions?